Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition and why it's so important to understand exactly what Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is. Alright, so, unlike anyone else on the internet, I am convinced that Dungeons & Dragons is not a game. It's fundamentally more than a game, and it really is. It's, saying it's a game is like saying that LeBron James likes soda. It's just such a radically diminutive and shallow understanding of what's happening, right? So I talk about this a lot. What is Dungeons and Dragons? But what I want to talk about today is why is it important to understand what Dungeons and Dragons is? So here's the reason why. The reason why it's critical to understand what Dungeons and Dragons is so that we can interact with it in the right way, okay? In a way that is beneficial to us as the people experiencing Dungeons and Dragons, and to the owners of Dungeons and Dragons, and to the Dungeons and Dragons community overall. Those three different groups. Those three different groups. So, players and DMs, the D&D community, which, pay attention, the Dungeons & Dragons community is more than just players and Dungeon Masters. I'll tell you that right now. And also to the ownership of Dungeons & Dragons, the company who owns Dungeons & Dragons, which is Hasbro. All right, so in order to explain this, I need to talk to you about a current television show that's on television that has helped me get a better understanding of Dungeons & Dragons. And that television show is Kenan, right? So I am a huge Kenan Thompson fan. I became a Kenan Thompson fan through the movie Good Burger. It's a fantastic film. If you haven't seen it, go check out Good Burger. It's filled with joy and philosophy, all right? And Good Burger is just a great film, and I've been a fan of Kenan Thompson ever since then. And I've watched him for literally 20 years on SNL, right? And so Kenan Thompson is a comedian, and he's I think at this point he's mostly famous for being on SNL, right? So he was brought on to a new sitcom recently, and the sitcom is called Kenan, all right? And it's completely fictional, but in this show, he is a widowed father, okay? So his wife has just died, and he is super sad about this, and he has two girls that he's trying to raise, and he's struggling to raise them. This is a situational comedy, okay? Now, I started watching it because I really like Kenan Thompson. You know what I don't like? Stories about dead moms. Like, I'm not, if you're like, hey, you want to watch a story about a dead mom? No, I do not. I do not want to watch a story about a dead mom, right? Or people grieving over a dead mother. Now, I'm not interested in that, right? So the only reason I arrived at this show was because I like Kenan Thompson, right? So I'm watching this thing and I'm like, this is just terrible. I do not enjoy this. But I keep watching it. Now, why do I keep watching it? Because I want to see if this is where Kenan Thompson's career dies, right? And so I'm watching it, and I reach episode 6, and I go, oh my gosh, I finally understand this show, right? And what I realized is that Kenan is not a bad show that I dislike. Kenan is a horribly mislabeled product, okay? Kenan is not by any way a situational comedy. You know how I can tell you that is the case? Because I have never once laughed at a single line of dialogue from this show ever. Not once, right? There is nothing funny in the show Kenan. But what there's compelling characters, there's an interesting family structure, and there's an interesting examination of grief, right? So the reality is, I think, 1,000 years ago, they would have just called this show a tragedy and been done with it, right? And today, what I think Kenan really is it's a part of a new grouping of shows called a Sharo. That's my name for them. Nobody has applied this name, but it's absolutely a new type of show. This Is Us is a Sharo. Kenan is a Sharo. And there are definitely other shows where the point is to put sorrow on you, the viewer, right? It's very interesting, people eat lemons, right? They're bitter. Who would eat a lemon, right? People eat them. right? And so it is. So sorrow is now being sold on television a lot, right? And actually, I've been noticing there's a lot of grieving stories right now. Like, let's deeply explore grief, right? Oh, what do you think WandaVision was about? It was the sorrow, right? Like, it was the whole show about grief, right? Now, here's the thing, all right? So let's talk about this, right? So why is it important to understand what Dungeons & Dragons is? Dungeons & Dragons, in my opinion, is a life catalyst that can be used to improve, that can be used very effectively to improve a person, that a person can use to improve themselves dramatically. That's what I think Dungeons & Dragons is. I think it's a life catalyst that a person can choose to use to dramatically make themselves a better person. I truly believe. And the reason why I believe this is it's exactly what's happened with me. I'm a much better person because Dungeons & Dragons is my life, right? So once I realized this show, Kenan, is not a situation comedy, and I lost the expectation to laugh at a single line of dialogue, then I was free to interact with the show in the right way. And now I realize it's a Sharo. I'm watching a Sharo with Kenan, right? With Kenan Thompson in it, right? And this frees me to not hate the show, right? Which I really was hating it because I'm like, this is the worst situation comedy I've ever had, right? But what I realized was that somebody was like, hey, do you want a nice cold glass of milk? And I'm like, yeah, right? And then they handed me the best glass of sweet tea that's ever been made, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is terrible milk. And they're like, no, it's not milk, right? This is the problem. You just don't understand what you're experiencing, right? So I think it's really important. Like, I know you guys are so incredibly patient with me, and I do appreciate that, right? With me squawking and saying, hey, we need to know exactly what Dungeons & Dragons is. We need to answer this question. And we need others to see what Dungeons & Dragons is, because all these D&D commentators out there saying, this is a game, they ain't cutting it, right? And so I think it's absolutely critically important that people understand exactly what Dungeons & Dragons is and begin to interact with Dungeons & Dragons in a way that is correct, which is in a way that really grasps Dungeons & Dragons for what it truly is, right? All that's my opinion. I would love to know your opinion on Kenan, if you've seen the show, on the idea of the rise of Sharos, and most importantly, why do you think it's important for people to see Dungeons & Dragons for the full element it represents? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.